Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick, founder of Herbal 411, and haven't been around for a while, so thank you for hanging in there. I've been restructuring my clinics in Hoffman Estates and Crystal Lake, and then also entertaining some immediate care work in Indiana. Very nice area down in that community in Munster. Anyway, the idea with what I've seen in the last 2 weeks is that there is a lot of inflammation. My patients know that we deal with inflammation. We try to stamp it down, reverse it, and not have it pop up anymore in somebody's disease process or their lifetime. But in the immediate care setting, whether it's a sore throat, a stuffy nose, sinus infection, upper respiratory tract infection, belly pain, injury from sports, or just falling by mistake, there's always going to be a level of inflammation involved in the suffering or the pathology of the thing that you're suffering from. Now, that can even be made in the form of like a heart attack. Inflammation technically is key for the cholesterol that narrows down the arteries of the heart, the coronaries, especially the left main, the widowmaker. Well, inflammation is responsible for putting cholesterol, plaques, inflammation into the wall of the artery and then having it essentially narrow down until eventually it's 99%, and then you just have one little blood vessel, or red blood cell get into that little hole and it blocks up the artery and causes a heart attack. So if we could eliminate inflammation, that'd be great. In the case of, say, rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis, we have medicines that will turn off the body's inflammatory response, which could be considered good for a disabled psoriatic arthritis patient. But at the same time, you'll probably see those commercials on TV that if you're going to use this medicine, you must tell your doctor that you have or have not been exposed to TB. You'll see them on those infomercials where the person just talks really fast and they try to get all the side effects out in like one sentence while they're playing this good, peaceful music and people jumping around, and they distract you with the visual, but they blur all the side effects. Anyway, the idea is that everything does have a basis to inflammation, and sometimes if you can control it, great. But I don't think you have to do it with those big monoclonal medicines. I think you can do it with natural ways of alleviation. Now, I guess the best way to apply this so that you're not on your own is to ask your doctor. And if you don't have an integrative medicine doctor on your side or on your team, please consider clicking the link down below and becoming one of my patients over at Hoffman Estates or Crystal Lake, or virtually. I have a couple patients that are outside the US and outside Illinois. But the idea, again, would be determine what your problem is, determine what triggers the inflammation, and then don't do that activity, or reverse that activity with some kind of Band-Aid. In the case of what I want to talk about today, we'll assume that you've already been triggered and you're walking around with pain, or you're walking around with that disease process really fired up. So what would I do? First off, these are terrible. These are ice packs that we give in the immediate care center and doctor's offices. And all you have to do is you essentially pop the bag that's in here, and it exposes chemicals that cool down by entropy. So it pulls energy from the atmosphere because of the chemical combination of the two things that are separated in this bag. Well, this is not that great, but this is nice for the immediate care center because we can store them. I'd rather have you get a pack, a Ziploc, and fill it up with ice cubes and use that as your cold pack. The cold pack in Chinese medicine is not supposed to be deployed. It seems to slow down energy. You don't have to worry about that. For all intensive purposes of my video, if you have nothing else available and you're not sure, should I put ice on it, should I put heat on it, just use ice until you get to your doctor or your acupuncturist or me, and then at that point in time we'll decide on the heat part. One thing is for sure, in the Western world, when we put ice on stuff, that's that acronym rest, ice, compression, and elevation. And I think that's a good safety acronym. You can't go wrong with it unless you compress and choke off the blood supply to your extremity, and that's not good. But using an elastic bandage, you probably won't be able to do that. Anyway, if you have an injury, say if you have an elbow injury or a wrist injury, you're not sure, a finger injury, get ice on it and leave it on for about 10 to 15 minutes max. And why do we top out at 15. I like to remember, if you look at the face of a clock, and 12 o'clock is the top when the shorthand and the longhand get together, or you just hit the o'clock portion, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Whenever that hits, it should be alarming you that you should be getting ice on your wound or on your boo-boo for about 10 to 15 minutes, and you take it off. I usually say 10 so that you don't get any frostbite. And believe me, I've seen patients come in with frostbite. That means blistering and excessive redness and tenderness, like a sunburn, to the extremity that they were cooling down. This will never get you frostbite. It does not get that cold. It's good enough for an immediate care center. But if this was an ice pack and I put an ice pack on my wrist skin can get frostbitten. So that's why it's usually got to be 15 minutes max. And I just chose 15 minutes, 10 to 15, because it's quarter of an hour. It's easy to remember 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock. So you just let it sit there for that time. It was so cool. I just came back from Rome and Greece, and every city you go to, there's churches throughout. And at every top of the hour, you'll hear bong, bong. And it's kind of cool, almost like you have to pause for a second and just reflect back and think, okay, it's 12 o'clock, fine. Or this is where I am in space and time. But it also, the sound and the tone of the bells are so reminiscent of old days. Or if you're Catholic or you have any kind of religion, the bong is usually symbolic throughout the town to tell the whole townsfolk that something's going on. Not the big alarm systems that you'll hear with Godzilla attacking, just the bong. So it's a gentle reminder to tell you just pause for a second. Anyway, going back to the ice thing, if you do it every top of the hour, 10 to 15 minutes, that is cool. And why do we do it for that amount of time and not just a whole hour? Well, you can't really walk around with it because the action of this is vasoconstriction. When you put cold on something, it closes the blood vessels, the veins especially, and the veins do not bring any further blood to the area. So you'll see, say, if I put it over here, it'll be blanched white. And that's positive, that's good if you have an injury, because when you have an injury, the body's normal reaction is to flood the area with blood and white blood cells, fibroblasts, or even the immune system to fight the infection. In most cases of closed injury or closed skin injury, it would be to fight the inflammation and the injury, tendon tear, muscle tear, whatever it is, or bone bruise, bone break, fracture. So if you turn off the blood supply temporarily for 15 minutes, there'll be less flooding of the area. And when it's less flooding of the area, you have less swelling. Now, in the case of an ACL, you're not going to be able to penetrate ice that deep into a knee. ACL is anterior cruciate ligament. And in an anterior cruciate ligament, you'd have to really encompass this whole thing with a huge bag of ice, and it'd have to penetrate from the skin through the patella into the middle of the knee. It'll never do it. But for most cases, if you get ice on it, I have seen very good outcomes. In fact, I think I had somebody with a potential ACL tear, and I told that person, who I think was Friday or Saturday, they wouldn't be in to see ortho at least for 3 days. So I said, my evaluation was that this is something called a Lachman test. That's one of the most sensitive tests for an ACL tear versus a pivot shift versus an anterior drawer. So all those things, I said it was an ACL, it was partial, and you're not going to be able to get into ortho until Monday. So your job over the whole weekend is to keep the swelling from accumulating. Because if that lady would have had an elephant-sized knee and saw the ortho on Monday, he wouldn't be able to do anything. It'd be so swollen. He'd say, yeah, it sounds like it. Come back when it's not swollen. So I think it's really good when injuries come in and the person that has the injury is done their due diligence with cryotherapy, ice therapy. And if you don't have any Ziplocs at home, use a pack of frozen peas. You can always go buy them at Target or Jewel-Osco without the sauce. Because I think if you have the sauce, it sometimes hardens the peas together and you can't break it. But if you just get the pack of frozen peas, you can reuse it. It'll be moist on the outside because of the sweating, but you just put it back in the freezer. And peas seem to form. They're malleable around the joint, so I think are always good. Those blue things that some people have from previous surgeries. They do circulate cold water, so I think they're cool. The blue freezer things, that's a step up from here. I don't like those. I just don't think that they trap enough cold to transfer over. The gel in those things doesn't transfer a deep enough cold compared to a couple ice cubes. So that's the first thing, is always go to ice until you see your doc. And again, 10 to 15 minutes, top of the hour, until you see your doc. If you have to go to sleep, you have to go to sleep. The last note that your knee or joint or whatever should feel in bed is ice, and then once you fall asleep, you'll probably kick it off and leave it on the ground. At least it'll be helpful. If you have to wake up every hour, you're not going to want to do that. Second thing, these are my two go-tos. I like turmeric. So turmeric, if you look at the data of Janet Funk, this was back in the 90s, she found that inflammatory markers in patients using turmeric or curcumin, which is the active ingredient turmeric, had better control of their inflammatory markers than people who didn't. And that was in a population of arthritis sufferers. But some of the turmeric out there doesn't have pepper or pepperine. And this one has pepper. I don't know if you could see that, but this is Doctor's Best. And there's the black pepper right here. I have no idea if you can see that because I can only see a bunch of squiggly lines. Probably getting old. Again, this has been approved by Consumer Lab, last time I checked, and I've been using this forever, and it has black pepper in it. I used to use New Chapter, who is now purchased and owned by Procter & Gamble, but they never had black pepper. And when I called them back in the 90s, I asked, hey, how does your product get in? And they said it is because it's supercritical, meaning they cool it down with CO2. And I said, wait, that doesn't have anything to do with how it gets absorbed in the gut. Oh, yes, it does. Forget it. So I don't use New Chapter. I like this. Now, so usually it's 1 to 2 capsules, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Sometimes if I have a huge injury, I'll do it even more than that. But one side effect, I think, is that you might get a little bit of constipation because it is an herb. And this one in particular that I would get online. I don't like buying from Amazon anymore, so I go straight to Doctor's Best website. Or if you go to your local Fruitful Yield, or if you go to your local Whole Foods, I think that's fair too. I just don't trust Amazon because of fake products out there. You don't know who's who. So here's the ingredients, if you can see that, and that's the label. So this is great. I've told this story before. This is Panaway by Young Living. It has several essential oils in it, but the most important one is helichrysum. Helichrysum just has served me so much. I made it through 2 marathons. Every time I have an injury, I always apply this. And sometimes if you sit next to me on a plane, you'll smell this, especially on my neck. So I feel sorry for whoever sits next to me. But helichrysum, I believe, the essential oil, has an action, in addition to blue spruce, and I think there's wintergreen in that, has an action where if it penetrates into the skin, hopefully into the superficial layers of subcutaneous fat, it will start to help with the inflammatory process. If anything, the heat, well, it's evaporative. So the what my son calls spiciness, when you apply this, and if you do it to freshly bathed or showered skin without moisturizer, it actually gets super hot, meaning it burns a little bit. But it'll ease up after a couple seconds. I have to sit there and go like this, and then it calms down. But then I know the effect is coming. Now, whether that's psychological because of the evaporative process, and the evaporative process in areas of inflammation, it makes the brain think, instead of pain, it makes it think, whew, it is freezing cold or it's super hot. And then you get distracted and not think about the pain anymore. There's substance P that goes into, is a neurotransmitter for pain, especially with superficial nerve endings. And substance P, this is documented not with helichrysum, but more with capsaicin. And I don't have that here today, but when you eliminate or exhaust substance P out of the superficial nerve ending, which you can do by over-exhausting using some form of sensation, whether it's capsaicin, which is hot peppers. I'll put a link to the previous video I did on capsaicin, really old one. Or I think in the form of wintergreen. And I'm just doing this by, the wintergreen it wasn't studied, it was a capsaicin that was studied, but when substance P was eliminated or exhausted, the patients that put the substance P on wouldn't feel pain anymore. They would feel burning from the black pepper, because that's what substance P results from, and that's what capsaicin is, but they wouldn't feel any more pain, which is good. Now, if wintergreen does the same to you, where it distracts you to think more about evaporative and not about pain, that's a win. Now, some people would say it's psychological or placebo, but who cares? I mean, this is expensive. I can only find this online, and I have to go to Amazon, but I had to go to Amazon to find a buyer, and now I just buy from that buyer outside of Amazon. So I use both of those all the time when I have an injury or when I've done an aggressively hard workout during resistance day, or I did a little bit more miles as far as my cardio day, and I'm walking around like John Wayne, really stiff. I'll use these two as a go-to, then I'll put them back away because they're a little pricey. I don't want to use them all up all the time. Here's something that you can get too. This is over the counter. This was really cool when it first came out. This is Motrin or ibuprofen in topical gel form. You can also find diclofenac, which is Voltaren, in topical gel form. The only thing I don't like about this is that the gel, I don't like the way it feels. So I just got this for the purposes of the video. I'll probably open this one of these days, or I'll give it to a lucky patient that happens to come to my office. But this is nice because if you have an ulcer, or if you have reflux, or if you just have that feeling of burning here when you have spicy food, coffee, alcohol, overstuffed bellies, that usually means that your stomach is irritated already. And if you were to take Motrin, ibuprofen, Advil, Aleve, Naprosyn, over-the-counter stuff like that, and that causes a flare-up of your stomach. I think I did a video on this when I was heading up to Mount Whitney. I took a bunch of folks to my last excursion. I was painting my back with topical like this, but it had anti-inflammatory in it. And I did great going up the hill. I was the oldest guy in the group. I kept up with everybody, almost. But I led most people up, and then I fell back because I was old. But anyway, I didn't have any pain. I caught up with everybody. So I attributed that to the anti-inflammatory effect of the topical, which I'll talk about in a second. But I also developed what I felt was an ulcer because I'm super sensitive. I have a wimpy gut. And the topical was so good, it penetrated into the muscle, which was mostly my low back area. I had a lot of back pain when I was carrying the 40, 50-pound backpack. But I didn't have pain going up to summit because of the anti-inflammatory. It got in and it gave me upset stomach, unless that was my heart. And I was able to tolerate the ride up or the walk up, but I was in anguish going down, thinking, oh, is this my heart or is it my stomach? And eventually we got back down to a normal altitude from 14,000 feet, and my stomach eased up. As soon as we got into town, I bought some Prilosec at the only store in Whitney, or wherever that was, and then it started getting better. By the time I got on a plane, I was good. So more to come on my heart in a later video. But so this you can get also topical pain relief if you don't have a compounding pharmacy that can make cool stuff over the counter. If you have ulcers, be careful, but this is actually better for you than actually taking the pills, because taking the pills, guaranteed you're going to flare up your ulcers, your reflux, your gastritis. If you do the topical, you might not have the penetrance like me, and it might just get to the skin and the joint instead of going all the way to the stomach. But it is cheap, but it's kind of goopy. That's why I don't like it. And that's where I would say, if you're one of my patients, you can always go ahead and call me and I'll get you a prescription for this. This is from Wakanda Pharmacies, and I've put together different compounds at micro dosing levels. This one in particular doesn't have an anti-inflammatory in it because of what I just told you, my pain with inflammation. But it has essentially everything else. It has a muscle relaxer. I asked them to put menthol in. Let me see if I can still smell the menthol. Yeah, a little bit. And I asked them to put baclofen, a muscle relaxer, I think magnesium topically, and the menthol, and something else, and I'm blanking on the last one. Flexeril, cyclobenzaprine, I think. So we put a whole bunch of different things in here, and if I put on my back, it will hopefully penetrate, especially to thin skin. I have thin skin, and it'll get to relax the muscle. Now this, again, mine does not have anti-inflammatory because of my excessive sensitivity, but it has everything else, and if I apply it, I hopefully will not get the dopiness of taking a muscle relaxant, because that's what muscle relaxants do. And I might call something in for you if you're one of my patients, whether it's Immediate Care or Crystal Lake or Hoffman Estates. But I think that the muscle relaxant pill that I like to give is tizanidine, Xanaflex. I think it works well, doesn't have too many side effects. You use it at night, sleep deeper, and then you wake up, hopefully it's out of your system. But for those people that are really spasmed up, then I'll say 3 times a day, as long as you stay home and you don't have to climb ladders or drive. And definitely not operating any heavy machinery. But the idea would be, if I can get you to loosen up, and then it's loosen, then usually muscle will also loosen. If the brain is really responsible for a lot of the spasm that we get. You can have injury and that can spasm up muscle by itself. But if you really think, oh, this is going to hurt, you can actually make the spasm worse. So sometimes by disconnecting the brain's thoughts, you take half the spasm and pain away, and you win. You can start loosening up. That's why chiropractic is so good. If you're with the right chiropractor, they can do a fast velocity acceleration, pop something, which is usually stretching muscle, pop something and make you feel, oh, that's great, but it's scary. I wouldn't stretch or pop the things in the neck. I had one patient that did that, and I think she had a stroke, but it was more of a transient ischemic attack back in the 90s at CDH. So you have to be really careful about the way that velocity gets applied to your neck. Anyway, that's a topical, just like this topical and this topical. This is the thing of choice as far as turmeric, which is very commonly out there. Anybody could use it, even young people. You probably shouldn't use turmeric if you have warfarin. If you're taking aspirin, it's okay. If you're on warfarin, which is Coumadin, be careful with that. Last but not least, here's the newest. I have to hide this name because it's one of my patients. Here's the newest from South Lake Pharmacy. This is a peptide. I'll probably do a separate video on this at a later date. I did one on BPC 157. Great results with some of my patients, not all. This is TB500. So peptides, those of you who know about Ozempic or Mounjaro, those are peptides. Insulin is a peptide. So peptides are short combinations of amino acids, short chains of amino acids, I think up to 50, if I'm not mistaken. Anything past that amount or that length of amino acid back to back to back is considered a protein, but short of a protein you have peptides. Peptides can act as messengers in the body system, especially if you inject them. Peptides can also stimulate certain pathways, like healing, and that's what TB500 does. I'll probably get into it in another video, but it accelerates your healing process. So if I have a lot of people with severe pain, especially when I see them in the urgent care center. These two are not paid for by insurance, but I think they're great accessories to you getting better. This is a spectacular accessory, and I'm using it, I'm just starting to get into peptides, but the patient that I'm taking care of is a cyclist, and he had an acetabular, he had his hip injured sometime last summer. And we thought, oh, he's going to have to get surgery done to fix this thing. But the surgeons don't like to touch deep, soft tissue injuries. They'll take care of fractures. But the surgeon essentially didn't want to do much. He just wanted to wait and see. And then we figured out, let's try this peptide. First, we tried BPC 157. I'll pull the link down to the video I did below. And then we added TB500 to the BPC 157. I'm very conservative. I like to do one thing at a time, no other variables, and then I see if it makes a change in somebody's life. He wanted to do both, and I was okay with it. But he's great. I mean, he's actually riding again, no restrictions. And that's not placebo. He got better in the course of, and we're old. He's old. I think he's older than me. But we're all in that bracket where we should be slowing down and retiring. Well, that's not going to happen for me the next 10 years. 72 is when I think I'll be retiring. But anyway, so we shouldn't recover from massive injuries. But this is the beauty of living a healthy life. He is spectacular with his cycle riding. He's one of my boring patients. Well, he was boring until he got injured, but now he's back to being boring again. And I just think all my guys that cycle, God bless you. I mean, my cyclists have the best VO2 max, they have the best endurance, they have the best HRVs. Their numbers are great. Most of them have very good body weight. The waist to hip ratio is good. The weight to power ratio is great. I think you have to, if you're doing 100 miles at a time, I think you just have to be efficient with your weight, your power, and your strength, no matter what age you are. And if you have that in your pocket as you get into the next decade of life, the next decade of life is a piece of cake. If you don't have that and you wait till the next decade of life, might be tough because you're older. That's why I always like to bank my muscle. So some people will wonder, why am I waking up so early? Why am I going to the gym all the time? Why do I do different things? I don't want to be an athlete. I know I call my patients patient athletes just to inspire them. I do consider my patients athletes. Even if they're not athletic, they're trying. And you don't have to necessarily be an athlete, but you do have to be healthy and fit. There's a difference. Athletes are specific to their performance. They're very exact. I guess you could say sports specific. Being fit and healthy, I just want you to be able to do anything. If I say you have to run up a hill, if I say you have to swim, if I say you have to ride, if I say let's go take a CrossFit class, if I say let's go do yoga, if I say go hike with me, you should be able to do all that stuff. Just like when you were a kid. You've seen grade school and high school kids, they just do anything. Most of them can do anything. I don't know about now. I think 50% are overweight. But you should be able to do anything and then maybe pay for it the day after or the days after with delayed onset muscle soreness, for which you will use all this stuff. But as 30, 40, and 50 comes around, nobody does that anymore because they're working full time and they say they have no time. Although that's the number one thing that decreases disease presentation is exercise. Nutrition is second, exercise and activities first. And I really think that all my patients have to move. So if I ask you, if you're one of my patients and I ask you, what's your activity? And I hear, I walk. I pause for a second and I wait for the rest of it. It's like, okay, anybody walks. That's like saying I breathe. So if that's your pinnacle of activity, we're missing something, and that's where I design exercises for you or introduce you to physical therapy, Athletico, or my pelvic therapist or whoever. But I really think that if we push the paradigm with your muscle and your fitness, that you'll be better attuned to the challenges that are coming up. Whether it's you break a hip, and hopefully you don't break a hip because you're exercising, even with osteoporosis. I have to tell you this story real quick. When I went to Greece, I broke my luggage and I was trying to bargain with this guy to give me a piece of luggage replacement at a cheaper rate. And this old lady, really tiny, she was walking around like this. I can't show you. She was walking around like this. And I started just moving up the steps because Greece, it's a lot of steps where we were, Santorini. And she was kind of walking in and out of all the overweight other people. And guess who the overweight other people were? They're all American tourists. And there's a tiny old lady dressed in black. She was really good. She was holding her veggies. And I just asked the guy, do you know her? Because I waved to her when she was passing by. I thought she was cute. And he said, yes. And I said, how old is she? And the guy had to think in his head. He said, 94. I thought, oh my gosh, this is great. This is almost a centenarian. So I went to chase her, and she was way at the top of the hill by the time he calculated at 94. So I caught up to her, and I said, can I take a picture with you? I'm a doctor from the United States. 94-year-old. And she was just rattling off, oh, I sent my kids to Boston in the 60s to learn tourism, and now they're running my 2 hotels. And that's where she was going. She had her vegetables that she's going to chop up for the day and make stew or something for the day, for the meal of the day. Like here, you buy veggies, and if they don't last past 3 days, you say, oh, I'm not going to buy veggies, I'm wasting money. Over there, they buy the food and the veggies for the meal of the day. And they do that every day. And she was walking up and down. And so I do think, so anyway, that's just a powerful testament to the speed of a 94-year-old lady and the mental prowess of that lady because of the activities and because she was engaged and because she was running, I don't know if she was running them, but she was involved with 2 hotels. So there's a sense of purpose. There's activities, there's natural food cooked from scratch. It's everything. And I bet you she prays. So unfortunately, going back, sorry for that riff, but I think it's really important to have a remedy if you deploy exercise and if you have an injury or if you just have delayed onset muscle soreness, deploy everything or one at a time. If you wanted to find a reason or you don't have a reason, come to see me and I'll give you a reason, because I really think that exercise, activity, muscle, the more muscle you have, the less disease that you'll encounter and the easier it will be to turn around your disease once it comes up. We all are going to age no matter what. I'm going to be 62 this summer, and I think I'm healthier than the average 52-year-old. And I think that I'm not doing it to brag, but I'm trying to beat aging. Again, I made some bad decisions, but I won't be retiring until I'm 72, and then I can enjoy life. But I want to do what I'm doing because that's the most important thing. Is my sense of purpose is to serve other people and teach them what I know, and that just takes time. Anyway, if you chase your dream, if you have a sense of purpose, and if you have muscle, I think you'll do greater. So hopefully this gives you a couple of ideas on what to do as far as inflammation. If you have nothing but Advil to take and an ice pack, that's fine until you see an orthopedic surgeon. But I do, and 80% of the time, I can figure things out just with not even having my hands and doing the manipulations that we learn in sports medicine, just hearing the mechanism of action. You can usually figure it out. Sometimes it's nice to see x-rays and MRIs and CTs, but sometimes it's just important to start the basics, and this is part of the basics. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to me, my YouTube channel, and if you need a doctor, I'm available. If you know anybody that's suffering and they don't know what they're doing and they're putting heat on things and making it swollen, please just share this video with them and give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you at the next video.